Lesson 110, Plural Direct Objects. So, Catherine, at this point, our listeners know what a direct object is, and they know how to make one in Greek with the words we've been working with so far. They simply change the ending to omicron nu, and that's how we make a direct object. For example, in our example sentence, we have hippon instead of hippos.
Mm-hmm.
But that's singular. What if we want to have a direct object that's plural? What if I have not just one pen, but multiple pens? How do I say that in Greek? That I have pens or I have horses?
So there we need a plural direct object ending. So in this case, the plural direct object ending that our listeners are learning is ous. So omicron, upsilon, sigma.
And we get that not only in the noun, but also we see that in the article, right?
Exactly. So instead of ton, which is the singular, we have tous, which is the plural direct object article.
So the horses as a plural direct object would be tous hippus.
Exactly.
And we see that here in our second example sentence, Kadmos tous hippus eche. Cadmus has the horses. So, Catherine, now that we're studying these plural direct objects, we're going to have a diphthong in our last syllable. And so this is what we were talking about in the last lesson. These are things that can make the last syllable long, right? If that last syllable contains a long vowel, or if it contains a diphthong. Not if the omicron iota diphthong is the last thing in the word, that doesn't count. Or if the alpha iota diphthong is the last thing in the word, those don't count. But other diphthongs, like the one we see here, omicron upsilon, that does make that last syllable long, right?
Right. And so that means that the phenomenon we've been talking about for the last couple of lessons is going to be in play here, where we have a long diphthong as the final vowel idea in the final syllable. And so that means that it's going to change or modify the accents sometimes.
So, Catherine, in some nouns, the accent is already on the final syllable of the word, so it can't move to the right any. There's no place for it to go. It's already at the end. But in other words, where we have the accent earlier in the word, like hippos or didaskalos, there you have a syllable to the right of it that it could possibly move to.
Mm-hmm. And for didaskalos, it has to.
So let's break this down a moment. For didaskalos, the accent is two syllables from the end on the syllable that we call the antepenult, right?
Right. Didaskalos.
And the last syllable of didaskalos is not long because it contains an omicron, which is a short vowel.
Exactly.
But when we change the ending to ous, when we make it a plural direct object, now we have a diphthong there in that final syllable.
Mm-hmm.
The omicron upsilon diphthong, which sounds like oo. So now that final syllable is long, whereas before, in didaskalos, the final syllable was short.
Right.
But now it's long with that omicron upsilon diphthong there. And so what happens when you do that? What happens when you make that last syllable long like that?
When you make the last syllable long, it forces the accent to move one spot to the right. So instead of didaskalos, we have didaskalus. So the accent is on the what we call the penult, or the second to last syllable, rather than the antepenult.
Right, and a quick review of those syllable terms. The last syllable in a word is called the ultima. Second to last is the penult. And then the syllable 3 from the end, we call that the antepenult. So from the end, working back, we have ultima, penult, antepenult. So here in this little example with didaskalos, we have the accent moving from the third to last syllable, which is the antepenult, to the second to last syllable, which is the penult. And so it's going to sound like didaskalus. And really, from the perspective of our readers, this really pertains mainly to pronunciation. We just want them to put the stress accent on the correct syllable. Is that how you would describe that, Catherine?
Yes, definitely. At this point, it really affects pronunciation more than anything else.
So even if you don't understand all these rules, which is fine, just try to pronounce the word correctly. And as you progress forward in your knowledge of Greek, you'll eventually gain more of a thorough understanding. But at least in the meantime, you can put the emphasis on the right syllable. Like my old saxophone teacher said, don't put the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Right. There's also another way that the long final vowel can change the accent. And we see that in the next example word, hoiros.
So, Catherine, when we make the last syllable long with the Omicron upsilon diphthong, that circumflex in hoiros changes to an acute accent. I don't know why that happens. Do you happen to know why that happens?
I don't. I just know it does.
Okay. Neither do I. And it has something to do with Greek grammar.
Yeah, I have a feeling it has something to do with what most textbooks call euphony, or making something sound good. But I don't know.
Before we go, let's take a look at one or two example sentences with our new thing for this lesson, which is the plural direct object. In this first example sentence, we have a farmer, and the idea is he has cats, or, well, rather he doesn't have cats. Nevertheless, the direct object is plural. So, ho georgos means the farmer. Uk eche says he does not have. And then the direct object is cats. Ordinarily, that word would be ailuros, with the accent on the first syllable. But here, it's a plural direct object, and it's got that diphthong in the final syllable. And so that makes the accent move over one notch from the first syllable, what we call the antepenult, over to the penult. That's the second to last syllable. So it sounds like ailurus, not ailurus, not that. So the sentence as a whole would say, ho georgos uk eche ailurus.
Right.
And so the thing to watch out for there is that the accent has shifted from where you would expect it to be. So that's kind of a thing to look out for in that sentence.
Exactly.
Let's skip over the second example sentence and take a look at the third one. Catherine, why don't you take us through that one?
Hoi didaskaloi kalamus echusin hoti kathe meran grafusin. So here, hoi didaskaloi, the teachers, are the subject. And the idea is that they echusin, they have not just one kalamon, but multiple kalamus. So plural direct object, pens, and that means we have the us ending. But because that ending is a long diphthong, the accent moves over from the antepenult to the penult. And so it becomes kalamus, not kalamus. That's not the way we say it. It's kalamus. And so they have pens, hoti, because kathe meran grafusin. They write daily.
Catherine, one last quick thing before we go. Let's look at the difference between exercises 1 and 2. They're mostly the same. It has a farmer having something, but in number 1, it's a singular direct object, just one horse. In the second one, it's a plural direct object. So the farmer has, and then in number 1, it's hippon, singular. In number 2, it's hippus, plural. So they're side by side, well, almost side by side. You have the singular direct object, and then that same word, but as a plural direct object.
Right. And 3 and 4 are very similar to 1 and 2, except that they have the definite article included in the direct object.
Yes, that's right. In number 3, ton hipon is a singular direct object. In number 4, tous hippus is the exact same thing, but plural. It's a plural direct object. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 are great study exercises for looking at these different forms.